Excellent. It's a pleasure to be here today and a pleasure to meet so many of you already. I will be available after this briefly for MD who has any further questions. But my name is Maggie McGee. I'm the Executive Director for Strategy and Governance at ACCA. And as part of that, I'm responsible for the teams who undertake the review and the issuing of practicing certificates. Our SMPs, SMEs, and indeed everybody who is in practice within the ACCA is a hugely, hugely valued member. Practice is the lifeblood of accountancy, in my perspective. And I think it's really encouraging to see so many of you here today to understand actually what do we need to do to obtain a practicing certificate. And also if you want to go further into the audit sphere. So it is really encouraging to see so many of you. Hopefully we'll be able to give you a really good flavour for what's needed. If we have existing practitioners in the room, I know that we have been experiencing some challenges or some delays as we've gone through our digital transformation this year. So if MD has any queries on existing PCs, we do have an email address that will get you directly through to the team, and also very happy to answer any questions, as we don't want any frustration or cause for concern by anyone in terms of this. But with that introduction, I'm absolutely delighted to be able to hand over to Yogesh and Radha, who are going to take us through a bit of the detail in terms of what you need to do before we open out for Q&A. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoy this, but I hope you also enjoy the rest of Accountex and the other ACCA events. So thank you.
So we'll start off with a little bit of an introduction into who needs a practicing certificate, why would you need a practicing certificate. Then we will go into the detail of how to obtain it. There are basically two main routes. Either you're working on obtaining your experience with an approved employer, which means that they are approved by ACCA to train you for the experience that you require to obtain your PC, or you're working for an unapproved employer, and there's slightly different forms for the two different routes there. So I'll hand over to Radha to then talk to you about who needs a practicing certificate, when do you need a practicing certificate.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me nice and clear? That's perfect. Thank you. What a nice morning to be here in London to get more goodie bags, and actually an experience that you really need to take back to your offices, workplaces, house, and actually in your life to grow. Grow in your personal life, in your professional life. So before I make a start on who needs a PC, can I have a show of hand who actually is a practitioner in the room here, first of all? Already running a practice, only 3 of them. I guess the rest of the team is on the journey to get a PC. Is that why we are here for? That's perfect. So another show of hand, if I can get, are there any auditors in the room here? Okay, just 1. Perfect, thank you. Oh, 2, 3. Brilliant. So you're running an audit practice, I guess, yes? Anybody working in the industry here? Okay, few of hand. And I guess the rest is in the practice, working. Brilliant. So that gives me a bit of an idea where we need to actually talk about various ways to get the PC, and get it right is quite important. It's very frustrating if you have done 2, 3, 4 years and then find out, actually, I can't get to that route because I wasn't at the right place. So getting at the right place is quite important. So first of all, let's have a look at the few notes here. Who needs a PC? Practicing certificate, being an ACCA member, when you have a journey to follow from a student to affiliate to a member, full-time member. If you are a student, obviously, you can't do a public practice. Similarly, affiliate, you cannot be in public practice. However, a full-time member can be in a practice if they meet the criteria. So what is a public practice then in that case? Anybody? Public practice? Oh, I'm not doing the accounts. Is it public practice? Public practice is a quite wide definition. When you're looking at the GPR, global practicing regulations of the ACCA, which all members, whether you are a student or a full-time member, have to abide by. And as a member, when you're signing it up, you make a confirmation, I will abide by all the regulations. So one of them is the GPR, which means you can be in public practice if you have a practicing certificate. Public practice is basically giving an opinion, a report, or a certificate, or filing an accounts, or giving anything on a financial affairs of a company or an individual to a third party to give them. It's been prepared by an accountant who's actually has assessed these are not true and fair view as an audit opinion way, but they are sensibly checked and actually have the reality of it. Yeah. Accounts and tax, not only, it's a wider. It could be a report, it could be a certificate. For example, you are not in a public practice, but you want to do, for example, a mortgage certificate. That is covered because you are giving a third party an indication, I've looked at it, everything is correct. So you're telling them you are in public practice. So public practice is doing these reports. I will come to the Q&A in a minute, so let me just kill a bit. In addition to giving the report, if you're holding yourself out to be in public practice, that's quite important. You printed a stationery with a visiting card or a website saying, I'm available for doing these certificates, accounts, reports. You are in public practice. You need a practicing certificate. So before you jump into that C, please, please, please do check with ACCA Technical Advisory Team whether the work that you are thinking to going into is actually covering in there or not. Instead, in addition to that one, you cannot be a shareholder, you cannot be a director, or you cannot be a partner. So I'm covering all the scenarios: sole practitioner, limited company, LLPs, partnership. You cannot be anywhere partner or a shareholder without a practicing certificate. There's a little bit leeway. You can be a 5% shareholder, very minority, less than 5% shareholder. But again, you cannot be a director. If you call yourself a director, you are putting yourself into public practice, and you must have a practicing certificate beforehand. In addition to that one, obviously, there are different jurisdictions. We are on UK, so we're talking UK rules here at the minute, but we are working on a global level. So if you are in a different country, working from a different country, you are just visiting here today, then you need to check whether you need a practicing certificate in that country to be get it, and that means you have to be here as well in the UK. In addition to this one, we get quite a lot of questions about when you are a member of another professional body. Because normal route for ACCA, they join from a different bodies. It could be from ICAS, ICAW, AAT. They think, oh, I've got a practicing certificate, I've been practicing for 10 years, can I be an ACCA student? I'm sorry, no, that is not possible. If you are a practitioner holding a practice certificate with another professional body, you must have an ACCA practicing certificate as well, without which you will be in breach of the conditions. So simple route, AAT, there are loads of AAT. When they join the ACCA studentship, they cannot go. However, there are certain bits they can go into. One of the service or exemptions being given in the members' regulations is bookkeeping service. So we all have life to live, and people do have side hustles, and half of the population actually have side hustles now. They do have a bookkeeping going on side by and a full-time employment. So bookkeeping is specifically given exemption in the members' regulations for students, affiliates, or members without practicing certificate to continue with. So people say bookkeeping. What is bookkeeping? Bookkeeping, I'm doing a data entry on a Xero or a Sage or a QuickBook. Is that sufficient? Can I file it to HMRC? Sorry, no. You cannot put yourself, because you are putting your name onto something that's going to HMRC, for example, and you're telling them you are submitting it on a behalf of a limited company, which means you are putting yourself into a public practice, which is not acceptable under the definition of the bookkeeping. Can I prepare a management account? Sure, you can prepare management accounts so long as they are for the internal use of the client. How you make ensure that this is going to be the case? You have to have a specific engagement letter with the client that this is purely for the internal use of the clients. And if you don't do that, you know they're going to be going to the bank for funding or to HMRC or to a third party, you are in breach of if you know it outright already anyway. So apart from these one, there's another exemption when we're going from the bookkeeping. Sorry, just one more point on the bookkeeping side. If as a student you are going through that side hustle doing the bookkeeping, you must be still regulated for AML. And that AML regulation cannot be with ACCA because you don't have an ACCA practicing certificate. What you need to do in that situation, you need to register with HMRC to get your AML regulation sorted. Can you register with HMRC as a tax agent? No, you cannot do that because that will be putting you in public practice. So make sure if you're doing the bookkeeping, you are registered with HMRC for AML regulation and you are purely doing the bookkeeping. If you're not sure of it, please go through the money loan members regulations for that wide definition which is in there. If you're not sure of where they can be found, please go to the stand. They can point you out to the resources where they are available. Okay, what else you can do as a member but without a practicing certificate? There's another exemption which you can do. Obviously, you have learned being a student affiliate and a member. You got a qualification. You want to help out your family, friends, and also you want to help out the local community as the charities doing various things. There's an exemption for the honorary work which is available to ACCA members. They can do honorary work without the PC. What they need to do, make sure they meet the conditions for the honorary work. One of them is it's an honorary work, which means you are not getting paid for it. You are not getting any benefit out of it. Secondly, the turnover or the gross income of the company or the charity you are trying to help out, the comparative year is not more than £250,000 gross income of that one. And thirdly, you are not holding yourself out in public practice. Do not, please, in any situation, do not hold out yourself to be in public practice unless you have a practicing certificate. That will be considered as a breach of the GPR regulations, and it's kind of a waste of the time you spent your sleepless night on passing the exams, which is the last thing you want to do, waste your time, what you've done in your life. So once you're happy with all the honorary conditions are met, you can help out doing the independent examination to your local charities. You can help out your brother to do his tax return. There is a way where you can actually register with HMRC as not a trusted advisor, but a trusted helper. That trusted helper can help out brother or a sister. And there is a limit. You can be only a trusted helper for 5 people. That's it. If you're doing more than that, you are already putting yourself into public practice to be available. And you are saying, I'm not getting paid. I'm not getting paid. You are not doing the right way of doing it. So those are the areas where you don't need a practicing certificate, like bookkeeping or the honorary work-wise. Otherwise, you would need a practicing certificate. Make sure that you have all the criteria met to the practicing certificate before you actually applying for it. There are different ways of applying it, and the 2 ways to apply is, one is through the approved employer route, another one is through the unapproved employer. Do you want to talk through I'll pass over to Yogi, who can explain how to apply for the approved employer route, which is actually easier way. So I'll pass over to Yogi now.
Thank you, Radha. So she's obviously taken you through all the different scenarios in terms of when you need a PC. Essentially, anything to do with completion of accounts, tax returns, etc., you would need a PC. So in terms of applying for a PC, like Radha said, there's 2 routes: approved employer versus unapproved employer. Now, the advantage of having obtained your practice experience, so you need 3 years of total practice experience, out of which 1 year can be prior to getting your membership. So even whilst you're a student or affiliate, if you had 1 year of experience before you apply for full membership, that can count towards the experience. In total, you need 3 years of experience. The remaining 2 years must be after you've applied for membership and you're a full member. So that's in terms of the qualification criteria. Approved employer, there's a specific stream that the employer needs to register under. There is no cost to the employer. Now, throughout the slides, you will see QR codes on the slides as well. If you want to scan those, they will take you to the pages of our website where there's more detailed information. So do scan those QR codes as we go through the slides. So as an approved employer, if they are registered with the Practising Certificate Development Stream, what the difference it makes is that your experience then is part of your annual or even 6 monthly appraisals. They have specific dedicated work schedules that will be approved by ACCA so that you are obtaining all the relevant criteria in terms of experience. And towards the end, in terms of the application process, there is a much simpler form to complete when you're applying under the approved employer route. So there's the 2 versions of the forms. There's a PCER form, which is the Practising Certificate Experience Requirement, which is under the approved employer route. And if you're going under the unapproved employer route, there's a much more detailed form called the PCEF, or the Practising Certificate Experience form. That's a much longer form. So in terms of you obtaining the experience, if you're able to actually ask your employer if they're able to actually register as an approved employer under the PCD stream, it's advantageous for them as well, that if they take on any new recruits who are also training to be ACCA members in future, then they are already approved for that. And it's advantageous for you because your experience under that stream is, in terms of recording it and completing the form at the end, is much, much easier. And like I said, there's no cost to the employer, and the employer can scan that code and find out more information about how they can register. So in terms of the actual PCER form, which is the form that you would complete when you're obtaining experience under the approved employer route, when you go through into the ACCA website on the Practising Certificate section, you will be led through whichever route you want to go through. You just select whether you're either approved or unapproved route, and you will get the forms that you need to complete. So the PCEF, we'll just go through a little bit of detail of the PCER form here. The first part is simply your details. Now, these forms, they are PDF forms, so download the form first to your computer, and they can be filled in. So they are fillable forms. So you can fill into all these boxes. You can type into them. Once you're done, you save it, and then at the end, you're going to submit it to the authorization team. So the first part is simply your details. Part 2 of the form is if you are applying for that 1 year of pre-membership experience, then you complete part 2. If all of your experience is after membership, all 3 years, then you simply move on to part 3, which is for all the experience you've achieved after you've obtained your membership. Now, if you're working for different employers, so let's say if you change job through partway through having your experience, then you will need to complete a separate form for each employer. So just be mindful of that. So you will need that form for each different employer, okay? In terms of the next section, this is where the more detailed elements come in, parts 4A and 4B. So in terms of the experience that you are required to obtain, there are certain mandatory areas that you have to obtain experience in. Now, again, when you go through the form, there's guidance notes on the website as well. There are case studies as well, which we can actually send you links to if you come around to the stand later. We've got case studies on both the approved employer route and unapproved employer route. For example, people working in industry, somebody has done a case study on that and how they've recorded their experience. So there's lots of guidance, there's lots of examples, etc., all on the website. So go through all that. In terms of the form, like I said, there are areas of mandatory experience. Within each mandatory area, there are elements which you need to complete. And then there are optional areas as well. So within the optional areas also, you have got certain elements to complete. And within each optional area, you must ensure that the complete elements are completed. For example, on this screen, if you look, this is the optional area. The member has completed PC11, PC12, and PC14. Those are the 3 optional areas in total. You need 6 in total, but on this screen, we've shown 3 that have been completed. But if you look at PC12, it's actually got 2 elements there. PC12, the first line, and PC12, the second line. And they've only ticked on the second line there. So the important bit here is that every element within that optional unit must be completed. Some of the units have 2 or 3 different elements to it. A couple of units have, a few of the units have only 2 elements to it. One of the units has only 1 element, and that's preparation of tax return. So if you're doing preparation of tax return, that's an easy thing in the bag. If you prepare tax return, you've already done 1 element out of that unit. So in terms of completing this form, have a look at the form, have a look at all the mandatory areas, have a look at all the optional areas, pre-plan your route and pre-plan your experience in liaison with your employer, with your supervisor, and make sure that you're getting all the different areas covered. If you need to move around in your practice, for example, to your different department, then that's all pre-agreed. And you record all this experience as you go along. So one of the common things we get is that people have come to the end of their experience and either they've not recorded it and they're trying to complete all that in one go, where either you have forgotten what you have done or you don't have proper records what you have done, so you're not able to put things into the form itself. Or if you've changed jobs, for example, you've lost contact with the employer to sign off that experience. So it's quite important that you plan this ahead of time, make sure you complete all the different areas as you go along and get it signed off on a regular basis so that you don't have that problem as when you come to the end of it, those 3 years of experience are recorded and they're within your possession, so that when you want to submit it to ACCA, you don't have a problem there. And finally, in terms of the application, the PCEF and the R forms is the supervisor sign-off. The supervisor has to be a qualified accountant, member of an IFAC body. So make sure that is the case, and they have signed off. The authorization team will check with the supervisor in terms of what experience has been signed off. So it's not just a case of signing off. They need to make sure that they've actually supervised you and they know what work you have done, and they're signing that off. Apart from the bits that you need to tick off in terms of the units, there is then a section where you have to do a written piece, minimum of 200 words in each area of the mandatory areas that you have recorded your experience. There you have to give, for example, your role, some examples of what work you have done and what you have learned from that. So you need to write that down. Now there's a difference a little bit here in terms of the PCER form under the approved scheme, which requires a minimum of 200 words for that area, whereas with the PCEF, with the unapproved employer, it requires a minimum of 300 words. So there's yet again another advantage of going through the approved employer PCD stream, which makes it slightly easier in terms of the write-up that you have to do at the end of the form. Now, once you've completed the form, signed it off, everything, that is simply all your experience that you've recorded. In order to then also start practicing, you need to submit a separate application form, which is for the practicing certificate itself. So there's a separate application form for the practicing certificate. You don't have to do both of that at the same time. If you want to simply submit all your experience to ACCA, it is called banking your experience. So you complete all your experience and submit it to the authorization team. They approved it and it's banked, it's in your record. They will have it on the record that you've done this experience. If you're not yet ready to start practicing, then you don't necessarily have to apply for the PC at that point in time. A year later, 2 years later, if you're then ready to apply for a PC and start practicing on your own, then you can submit the practicing certificate application form on its own. But if you're doing the whole thing at one go, then you submit both of the forms at the same time. There is obviously a fee for the practicing certificate. There are two different practicing certificate levels. If you're practicing full-time, then it's the full fee, which is currently £619. There is a part-time certificate available as well. So if you're actually still hanging on to your job, but you want to just start venturing out with one or two clients, then there is a part-time certificate available as well, which you can apply for. The limit for that is obviously a very low limit. It's meant to be just for part-time, and it's limited to £5,000 of income per annum. So if you exceed that, then you would need the full-time certificate. So this is simply for possibly just one or two clients, up to 5,000 income per year. The part-time certificate fee is £124. But like I said, if you exceed that income level, then you would need to switch to the full-time certificate. So that kind of completes the whole process of the approved employer stream. And I'm going to now pass on again to Radha to just talk a little bit about the unapproved employer route.
Thank you, Yogi, for sharing the PCER route, which is the easiest route to get a PC. So please follow what Yogi said, and that's probably less time on the actual form filling in. What I'm going to say is the hardest bit, perhaps, PCEF, which is the full form, just under 40 pages. You have to be filling in every 6 months when you are actually gaining that experience. So the experience requirements are exactly the same, which is like 3 years, 1 year before and the 2 year later can be, or the 3 year post membership, basically. So route first, get your exams completed, get your affiliation, make sure you get on the membership ladder ASAP if you are thinking of going into practice. Some people hold to the affiliate status for a long time, and their experience, because they haven't had the experience post membership, that means it's delaying their journey. So from affiliate to membership, that's quite important. If you have your PER, practical experience recognition, get it signed off, get your membership, and that's a 2-year post membership. So please do that one to start with. Now, whether you do it with approved employer or through an unapproved employer, in number of years experience is the same. The forms are longer in PCEF. You have to be getting these forms signed off by your supervisor, making sure that, because you are not in an approved employer. So first thing, if you're thinking of going into that route, do you want your employer to be getting approved employer registered? If yes, get that journey started. If not, then in that case, you basically get your experience signed off from your supervisor, and make sure that your supervisor is qualified enough to be able to sign it as well. If you're not sure of what qualified accountants mean, do get in touch. Fact sheets and the guidance is available on the website. Look through the pages. If you're not sure of it, come back, we can explain it to you. Not a problem for that side. Once the PCF form is filled in, authorization team will review the forms. Once you've breaking down the experience, they will review the form. They will say green to go, red to alter, or put more experience in for that side of it. Once your experience is banked, you can then go start on your journey for PC. Please do not hold your affiliate status for a long time, which is the general problem we have seen talking to many members, because they didn't have the relevant experience post-membership. So that's the only one request I would say on the PCF. Try to avoid that route if you can. Longer forms, go to the easier route. Thank you very much. I'll pass over to Yogi for a new change which is coming in place for audit qualification, and that's probably going to be brief. I don't think there are many auditors apart from 1 and 2 noticed here. So we're going to brief that change here now.
Thank you. So just very quickly now covering the area of audit. So what we already talked about here is the application process for the practicing certificate, which gives you the general practicing certificate. If you want to be an auditor, you need 2 additional things: an audit qualification and a responsible individual status. So from this year, from January 25, in the past, we used to have the PC and the audit qualification as a complete package. We have now split that into two separate things because you can actually now have the audit qualification experience whilst you're still not a member. So even whilst you're in your student days, if you obtain audit experience during that time, you can actually count that towards your audit qualification. So just very quickly on that, yes, in terms of obtaining audit qualification, you need to complete an audit qualification form as well. Again, the QR code is there on the screen, so do go through that in terms of there's many FAQs on the website which will give you more information. And in addition to that, so again, with AQ and RI, you can have just an AQ and audit qualification, but then if you don't want to actually practice as an auditor, then you don't need the RI status. But if you're going to sign off audits for clients, then you need that additional responsible individual status. So there's a separate application form for that. There's no cost currently for either of those. But holding just the AQ on its own is possibly for, let's say, for partners who are in an audit practice, but who are non-audit partners, but they have an audit experience. So the regulations currently in terms of how an audit practice is controlled, it requires a certain majority of the members of that practicing firm to be audit qualified. So if you're not necessarily an auditor, you can still get your audit qualification, and that will help you in terms of the control element according to the regulations. But if you don't want to practice as an auditor, you don't need that RI status. You only need the RI status if you're going to sign off as an auditor. So I think that kind of gives you a real quick tour of all the different elements of practicing certificates and how to apply. As Maggie said earlier, we will now take a few questions, but if you have any questions about existing PCs, the email on the screen, authorization team, is there. And if you do include Accountex in the subject line, they will try and get to you as soon as possible. So over to you, the audience now, for any questions, please.
So we've got a question.
Hi. So I work in industry. I left my previous employer a couple of years ago, and I've got no contact with them. I've started a bookkeeping practice, so don't need a practice certificate yet, but I am a member. How do I get experience signed off if I don't want my employer to know that I'm trying to get a practice certificate and leave? What do I do?
So try to answer in a different way, basically. If the problem is you want to get it signed off, and how do you get it signed off without that knowing? I think the way you got to be a little bit more tricky here, to be honest, when you're talking to them about being open about it for the future growth, not the immediate change. Because if you're working as an approved employer, they always understand that at some stage in your life you want to be growing and then you want to get experience. And it's one of the commitments they make, that they will be signing off your experience while you are experiencing, gaining that side of it. I think it's giving them a broader, giving them a benefit. It will bring it to their organization by having this on board. Right. So if they are in SEMA, and then in that situation, do you have any auditors or external accountants you are working with?
There's a new, I don't have any contact with them.
Right, okay. Then another thing that you can do, as I said, you can be like a bookkeeper. You are a member already. You can be a subcontractor. Yeah. If you work as a subcontractor with an auditor or an accountant who would agree to sign off your experience, it will take time, obviously. So work along those lines. So you are still earning, it will take time and it will get signed off. But the arrangement would be, you will be working for them, they will be reviewing your work, and then it will get signed off. And make sure you get it signed off in real time rather than holding it.
The other thing that we can look at, because it is very complex in terms of individual specific circumstances. So you worked about previously having experience elsewhere?
Yeah, I've got no contact with them.
Right. because there is the potential, if there is experience or it's not necessarily an IFAC registered body, that we can use a waiver route. You still need someone to sign off the experience, and it would need to go to a committee to be approved. It does depend very much on specific circumstances. So we have to protect the public, but equally we want to support our members. So I think in this case, what I would suggest, if you've got very specific circumstances that fall outside of this stream, contact the team, because they will be able to advise, would a waiver route work potentially?
That could be another route.
And what other options you can do. So it just shows your circumstances quite specific, so I would contact them. And once we want to protect the public, which is why we have the additional requirements.
Hi. I have 2 years with an approved employer, post-membership, and 1 year pre-membership with non-approved employer. Do I need to submit 2 forms?
Yes, for each different employer, you would need a different form. So for the unapproved employer for the 1 year, right? Yes, you need separate forms for each employer. Okay, so you would need a separate form for the element, but with the unapproved, you will need to fill in the PCEF version of the form. For the approved employer, you just simply fill in the PCER, but there are separate forms for each different employer. The question is that she was working with an approved employer, but they've only been approved for the last 2 years of her experience. So under the PCT stream, all the experience that you're putting down has to be after they obtain the practicing certificate stream approved employer status. So only the 3 years obtained from that point onwards would count. Now, if you have already got some experience prior to them, it can still count, like I said, but you have to use a separate form for that. Or the alternative would be that you wait for another year, complete 3 years whilst they have been approved as an employer, and then submit that. So you might have to wait 1 more year. But if you can't wait for 1 more year, then you can still submit the unapproved element. You can submit via the PCEF form. So you still need, in terms of approved and unapproved, there's 2 different forms. If you have separate employments, each form will be separate for each employer.
Thank you to Maggie, Radha and Yogi. Thank you.